All right, Rwanda is under reviewed international scrutiny as it faces its universal periodic review at the United Nations Human Rights Council. While the country has made progress in some areas, serious concerns remain, ranging from political repression and media censorship to alleged abuse in detention centers and even cross borders. Human Rights Watch has submitted a detailed report outlining these issues. We're now joined by Lewis Mudge, Central African Director at Human Rights Watch, to unpack the findings and what they mean to Rwanda's human rights records. Lewis, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to...
Innocent, thanks for having me.
Yeah, perhaps let me begin by asking you, give us a big picture. What's the current state of human rights in Rwanda since the last UN review?
Well, yeah, these are periodic reviews, so they happen every few years, as you said. The last time Rwanda had its review was in 2021. And the UPR is unique because it's UN member states making recommendations to other UN member states. However, groups like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the like, we do have an opportunity to submit our own submissions. And to answer your question, Rwanda in the last few years, it really has gotten back on the headlines when it comes to support to the M23 in South Africa, in Congo, which is not going to be surprising to any listeners in South Africa because, as you're well aware, South Africa had peacekeepers in Eastern Congo at this time. And so whilst that, the support that Rwanda has been given to armed militias and armed groups outside of Rwanda's borders is certainly something that we're covering in our submission, we also want to use this as an opportunity to focus internally on what's happening in Rwanda. Rwanda makes the headlines for what's happening externally in countries like the Congo. But the fact is that over the last few years, since the last time they were up before the UPR, in terms of independent media, space for opposition parties, and space for civil society members, we've seen that space continually contract, and we see a real clampdown on both freedom of expression and freedom of association in Rwanda. And so this was high time to raise attention to that, in our opinion, as well.
Louis, we keep hearing about opposition members and journalists being jailed and some, of course, harassed. We know that some of this information has to be verified, but is it still so hard to speak out in Rwanda, and why is that?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. It is. Listen, anyone who criticizes the ruling party, anyone who criticizes government policy, or anyone who criticizes or who questions the last 30 years of history and how we got to where we are, takes significant risks in Rwanda, and that's just an unequivocal fact. There are threats, intimidations, there are suspicious deaths, there are disappearances, and there's the use of prosecutions against anyone who questions the government. The fact is that this is a very, very controlled and constricted space when it comes to your ability to criticize. And unfortunately, we've seen that space continue to decrease since the last time they were up in front of the UPR.
So you were blocked from entering Rwanda earlier this year, and what can you tell us about that? How was the experience?
So that wasn't me. That was my colleague Clémentine de Montjoie. She was blocked in 2024, but I myself was blocked in 2018. So I've certainly been there, and very much unfortunately, I was not. We had one researcher kicked out back in 2011, and in 2010 we had another researcher blocked. So we've had this is nothing new for us at Human Rights Watch. When I myself was kicked out, first of all, my work visa had been withheld. So I had to relocate to Nairobi from Kigali. And then subsequently, on one of my attempts to try to enter the country, I was refused admission and I was declared persona non grata. Unfortunately, this is one of the risks that comes with working for Human Rights Watch on countries like Rwanda. I think it more points to the fact that, unlike, look, United States, where I am a native of the United States, countries like South Africa, these are governments that don't necessarily want people, looking into human rights abuses and questioning things. But when you block the ability of independent observers like Human Rights Watch to come into your country, that really sends a message. To be clear, there are only a few countries in the world that don't allow Human Rights Watch to operate, and Rwanda is one of them. The other countries include North Korea, China, Russia. I mean, this gives you an example as to how authoritarian the measures can be in Kigali.
Let me then talk about your report. One of the cases that stood out in your report is the suspicious death of journalist John Williams Ntwali. What do we know about what happened?
Look, John Williams Ntwali, he was one of the few remaining investigative journalists in the country. He was also someone that myself and our researcher who currently works on Rwanda, Ms. Semosa, know very well. And he had been receiving threats. He had been receiving threats for the work that he was doing. He was someone who knew very well about the risks he was taking, and he took precautions to mitigate those risks. Nonetheless, in a move that is very much not like anything he would have done, he died at very early hours in the morning in a very suspicious and dubious motorcycle crash. No one knew where actually he was going. And there are a lot of questions that we have with regards to the cause of death, not least of which is that the trial against the individual who was supposed to have been involved in the crash was held behind closed doors. This is the death of John Williams Ntwali, very much unfortunately, is just one in just a long range of mysterious deaths in Rwanda. The fact is that when you become someone who investigates, looks into what's happening, questions official narratives, you run a serious risk. We've seen this over and over and over again. These people end up committing suicide in detention. They end up dying in mysterious auto or motorcycle accidents. Or, you have the case of Patrick Karegeya in South Africa, who was killed in Pretoria, who was murdered in his own hotel room. So they're not, by any means, they're not just safe within the confines, just as in danger in the confines of Rwanda. They're very much in danger outside as well.
Well, Lewis, allow me to put you on the spot, and I hope I'm going to get this out of you. There are some shocking accounts of, torture and detention. How widespread is this? And in your research, what kind of evidence have you found?
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of your first part of your question, widespread, it's difficult to say. The fact is that the system in Rwanda is very effective, and most people don't speak up. Most people don't assert fundamental liberties of expression or association. I mean, Paul Kagame wins 99% of the vote for a variety of reasons, but one of them is that there's no meaningful opposition, and if you try to actually vote for that meaningful opposition, you run the risk of people finding out that you're voting for it, and that in of itself is inherently risky. So in terms of the widespread nature, just by mere attrition, since the ruling RPF and Kagame took over in July of 1994, Kagame officially being elected in 2002, there's just not many folks left. So, we don't want to exaggerate the sheer numbers of political opponents. There just aren't many left. With regards to the evidence, look, Human Rights Watch, we've been working in the country since 1995, even though we've had scores of researchers, sent away and kicked out. We continue to have good networks in the region across the Great Lakes, and we continue to get our work done.
Just before I let you go, as a parting shot, has anyone actually been held accountable for these abuses?
Very, very few. There are some cases in Rwanda. Look, it's not to say it's a lost cause. The judiciary, whilst it's not independent, it's highly educated. And these are very, very competent and capable people, just as competent as anyone you'd find anywhere in the world. And there have been some very isolated cases of prison officials, most recently, being held accountable for torture of other prisoners. And that's something that we at HRW have applauded and celebrated. But the fact is that those cases are very few. And that the problems with regards to impunity and human rights abuses is much deeper than what a few cases can resolve.
All right. Lewis, thank you so much for making the time. And thank you so much for always making sure that human rights are upheld in the continent. Have a very good evening.
Innocent, thank you. Have a good evening to you.
All right. There you have it. Lewis Mudge, Central African Director at Human Rights Watch, to unpacking really the issues that has to do with Rwanda and human rights issues in that part of the continent. It has just gone 22 minutes after 9 o'clock Central African time. This is Channel Africa, the African Perspective.